what lifestyle did you have before Hitler?
What was the lifestyle? Well, I would say that quite normal, okay? But actually I suffered already even before I was taken to the camp, because I was deported twice from Hungary to Poland. And every time when we came back we had to start it from the beginning, because what happened is, you see that in the beginning you see the German government and the German collaborators, the Hungarian, the Czech, they helped the German. And first they come out with the law that they took the citizenship away from the Jewish people. Once they take the citizenship away, you're not allowed to own no property, nothing.
And the Nazi program called for the expulsion from Germany of strangers, of immigrants. Paragraph 4. Only those who are our fellow countrymen can become citizens. Only those who have German blood, regardless of creed, can be our countrymen. Hence, no Jew can be a countryman.
My name is Isaac Lyon. I was born in Czechoslovakia at January 31, 1931. I was taken to the concentration camp when I was 13 years old from Hungary. We were put on a cattle train. They pressed in at least 100 people, old, young, men, women. And when we arrived to Auschwitz, more than, I would say, at least half of the people were dead already, because we were on that cattle train at least about 12, 14 days. Can you imagine? No food, no water, no sanitary means, okay? And when we arrived to Auschwitz-Birkenau, we had over there one of the famous Dr. Joseph Mengele, that he made experiments on twins. And by the way, I'm one of the twins. And then he would see, you know, people that they still look physically okay, they would put them on one side, and the rest of the people would go to the other side, straight to the gas chamber to be killed. Okay, while I was in Birkenau, which called the D lager, the D camp, I stayed over there almost a year. After almost a year, you know, and of course Birkenau was on the border of Germany and Russia and Poland. And when the Russian army was coming closer, the Germans, they took us on the death march into Austria. Okay, why they call it the death march? Because almost the same story, you see, they didn't give us no food, no water, no shelter, very little clothing. Many people died from hunger, from tired, from beatings, from the cold, from starvation. So we arrived to Austria, less than half of the people that they started from point A to point B. In Austria, my first camp was, it's called Melk. Okay, I stayed over there maybe a month, and then they transferred me to another camp also in Austria, which called Mauthausen. Mauthausen was a very notorious camp. They killed a lot of people over there. From Mauthausen, they take me to a third camp in Austria, which called Gonskirchen. This was a camp inside in the forest. That the nearest civilized point was maybe about 15-20 kilometers from the forest. And when we were liberated, few days after that, we were scheduled to be killed. Okay. Anyway, we were liberated by the American Army, the 71st Infantry Division. I didn't see no American soldiers that they come to the camp, but I used to hear from far away noise like cannon fire, boom, 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 and every time louder and louder, so I knew that much what that means. Next thing I know, I looked, and of course we were surrounded by watchtowers by the Germans. Suddenly they just took off, and most of the people knew what that means. So after the Germans, they took off, the first thing that they did, they broke the food storage. And as you know, just as many people died after the liberation from food poisoning than during the stay in the camp. They went in the food storage. Next thing they did is they broke the main gate in order to escape. Okay? And before I met any American army, when we got out from the forest, the Germans, they had over all kind of vegetable gardens, so we went over there just like, wild animals. Whatever they grew over there, everything we ate. And then, of course, I met the American army that they give us real good food, cooked food, and candy, and chocolate, and all the rest. But we became sick. So I was in a city that called Linz, about a month and a half in a hospital. So I remember I was in a room, something like this one. We were about 40 people over there. Maybe 5 people came out alive. Most of them, they died from food poisoning. Anyway, so I started my journey, go back to Palestine, which is Israel today. At that time, 1946 was Palestine. Okay, it took me about 6 months to get to Palestine. And finally, when I arrived over there, of course, Palestine still was occupied by the British Army. Okay? When I still served about 10 months in the detention camp, because I came with no papers, nothing. And after that, they released us to the Jewish population. And later on, of course, the movement started over there for the independence of the Jewish people. And I was caught by the British at least half a dozen times. I was roughed up real good, okay? Until finally they left Palestine in 1948, when was the declaration of partition of Palestine. And after that, of course, I joined the army, and I lived in Israel for 16 years. When I left Israel in 1962, and I come to the United States. My first 8 years I lived in New York, Brooklyn, and then I come down to Florida, and I dropped anchor here, and since then I am here.
Did you ever feel the need for revenge?
Well, I tell you the truth, when I was a kid, I used to see how my father is being treated by the Gentiles. I felt, okay, I said, I wish I would be bigger. But unfortunately, everybody looked much bigger than I am. But the way they treated my father and my family, I knew, even though with all my questions that I used to ask my father and my parents, I would say half of the time they didn't give me a satisfactory answer, but I knew exactly how they felt. In reality, many times when I'm thinking back how they suffered, I would say that probably they suffered much more than I. Because can you imagine that the father being mistreated, okay, by others, when the kid sees that one and he cannot do nothing. So can you imagine what kind of example that is, a father to his son? Because me personally, I am a father too and a grandfather. When I come to this country, I'm not going to go into it, but this happened to me too, and of course, I look like a hero to my kids still today. When we start to talk about certain things, you see that they were mistreated, and the father come over there, and of course, I defended them, okay?
How do you feel about the people who say there was no such thing as the Holocaust, and that it was a lie invented by the Jews? What about presidents who've said this?
Well, of course, you see, what happened is that in the very beginning, after the Second World War, you have many denials. Today you have much less. Okay, because first of all, you have many exhibits in all over, especially here in the United States. I'm not talking over there in Poland, where when the killing ground took place, the big concentration camps. But today, many people went over there, and many people, they know that the thing happened. Okay, they cannot deny it. Very few people you have today that they are still saying that this never happened, including that famous writer from England that I think is serving 3 years in Austria, because they have a law over that nobody can talk to deny the thing. Okay, when he was over there, and I think a couple years ago he was caught and put in jail. About 2 years ago, I went to a school in Kendall. I think this was, so I went over, not Coral Reef, Robert Morgan Jr. This is also in the same area. They have a big auditorium over there, I would say about 300 seats. So there were 3 Holocaust survivors that they spoke to the student. One was in the morning, and 2 were afternoon, including me, that I went over there with a lady that she was a Holocaust survivor. Of course, I never saw her. I didn't know her, and I was supposed to start to talk at 1 o'clock after lunch. Okay, so when I went into the auditorium, they were already half full. Okay, and there was a lady over there, I was talking with her, in generally about myself, I didn't know from where she came, if she was the assistant principal. Okay, so while another lady was talking, when we were talking about 2 hours, every 15 minutes somebody else was talking. The lady sit down and I was talking and they asked me all kind of questions. So finally, just before I started to talk, the lady asked her, do you hate the Nazis? Do you hate the German people? Or do you wanted to commit suicide, I think, okay? So I think the 2 questions of her was, sure she hate the Nazis, okay, you hate the Germans, sure she hate the German, or commit suicide, I don't remember exactly what her answer was, okay. Anyway, so when my term comes, okay, they ask me those 3 questions again. Okay, so I said, I never thought of committing suicide with all what I went through, okay? Because I believe, you see, that God gives and God takes, okay? And He's the only one that, even though that I saw many people during my stay in the Holocaust that they committed suicide. You can see here on the exhibits, okay, because they prefer to die, because they could not take all this suffering, okay? When they asked me, if I hate the Nazis, I said, sure I hate the Nazis. Do you hate the Germans? I said, I believe that the Germans, they are different people today, okay? Because I believe that many Germans today, they live with the guilt of their fathers and forefathers, okay? When I said to them, that that's not easy life and that's probably going to stay with them all their life. And you should see the applause about that one. Okay, when the whole thing was over, so the lady comes from behind me, hugs me, and she kisses me, and then she tells me that she's a full German born, and she lives exactly her life the way I described it. I don't know if you heard about the March of the Living. Never heard the March of the Living, that every 2 years, youngsters from South Florida and all over the United States, Mexico, Canada, and you name it, they go over there to see the place, all the killing grounds, like Auschwitz, Birkenau, Majdanek, Treblinka, where they killed a lot of Jews, including the place where I was, and I went back already twice, okay? When you see what my head, 2 years ago I was there the last time. Okay, so you see, like I told you, at first I was on a death march, and then I went on the March of the Living. So who said that there's no life after death?
True.
Okay, because that's what happened to me. I went there already twice with youngsters, and I bring them to the same spot where I was, prisoners by the Germans. And it's not an easy feeling for me, okay, to go back over there. Even if I will go back 100 times, I will still have the same feeling. Well, no, you see, the second time when I went back already was much more easier for me, because not just that I was in the place, but all the schedule of the March of the Living I knew already in advance. So it was much easier for me, and I'm still planning to go back at least one more time.